Sarah taught at Lincoln High School, struggling to make ends meet on her modest salary while caring for her elderly mother. One rainy morning, she noticed Marcus, a quiet sophomore, being cornered by three seniors behind the school gymnasium. Without hesitation, Sarah stepped between them, risking her own safety to protect Marcus from harm. The incident escalated when one of the bullies turned out to be the son of the school board chairman. Sarah faced intense pressure to apologize and pretend nothing happened. She refused, knowing Marcus needed someone to stand up for him. Her defiance cost her the upcoming tenure review she desperately needed for a salary increase. 2 weeks later, while Sarah sat at her mother's hospital bedside, wondering how to pay the mounting medical bills, an unexpected visitor arrived with a sealed envelope. The contents of that letter would not only change Sarah's life forever, but would send ripples through the entire school system. Hi everyone, welcome to Mystic Tales. Today I'm excited to share a new story with you. Sarah pulled into the school parking lot earlier than usual that morning. The autumn rain made everything look gray and gloomy. She needed to grade papers before her first class, and the quiet of her classroom was better than her small apartment where her mother's medical equipment hummed constantly. As she walked toward the building, voices caught her attention. They came from behind the gymnasium. Sarah recognized the hostile tone from years of teaching experience. "Give me your laptop, nerd. Daddy bought you a nice one," a deep voice said. "Please, I need it for my project. My mom saved up for months," Marcus replied softly. Sarah heard shuffling and a thud. She walked around the corner and saw three senior boys surrounding Marcus. Tom, the largest of the three, held Marcus against the wall while Jake grabbed at his backpack. Marcus clutched it tightly, his glasses askew. "Stop right there," Sarah said firmly. She kept her voice steady despite her racing heart. "Step away from him." Tom turned, his face showing surprise, then defiance. "We're just talking, Ms. Wilson." "I said step away. Now." Sarah moved between Marcus and the boys. "Marcus, go to my classroom." Marcus hesitated. "But, Ms. Wilson." "Go, I'll handle this." The three boys watched Marcus leave. Jake stepped forward. "You should mind your own business." "Bullying a student is my business. Tom, Jake, Richard, principal's office. Now." "My father's on the school board," Tom said with a smirk. "He won't like hearing about this." Sarah stood her ground. "That's exactly why he needs to hear about it. Move." In the principal's office, Sarah described the incident while the boys sat sullenly. Principal Davis looked uncomfortable as he listened. "Ms. Wilson, perhaps we could handle this internally," he suggested. "Tom's father is reviewing your tenure application next month." Sarah felt her stomach tighten. The tenure would mean better pay, health insurance for her mother, but she looked at the boys' smug faces and thought of Marcus. No, this needs to go on record. They were about to steal his laptop. Marcus's mother works 2 jobs to support him. Principal Davis sighed. "Tom's father will want to discuss this." "Then let him discuss it, but I won't pretend this didn't happen." Walking back to her classroom, Sarah's hands shook. She had taught at Lincoln High for 5 years. The tenure review was her chance for financial stability. Now she might lose it all. Marcus waited at her desk. "Miss Wilson, you shouldn't have. They'll make trouble for you." Sarah smiled gently. "Some things are worth the trouble, Marcus. No one deserves to be bullied. Now, let's look at that science project you mentioned." The next morning, Sarah received an email requesting her presence at an emergency meeting. In the conference room, she found Principal Davis sitting with Robert Green, Tom's father, and the school board chairman. "Ms. Wilson, take a seat," Robert said. His expensive suit and stern expression made the room feel colder. "I understand you accused my son of bullying yesterday." Robert spoke while reviewing some papers. Sarah sat straight. "I didn't accuse him. I witnessed it directly. 3-star athletes against your word. Tom tells me they were helping the boy find his lost computer password." "That's not what happened. I heard them demanding his laptop." Principal Davis shifted uncomfortably. "Sarah, perhaps there was a misunderstanding." "There was no misunderstanding," Sarah said. "I heard everything clearly." Robert leaned forward. Let me be direct. Your tenure review is next month. The board takes disciplinary records very seriously. A simple apology saying you may have misinterpreted the situation would resolve this. Sarah thought of her mother's medical bills on her kitchen table. Her hands felt cold, but her voice remained steady. I can't do that. Ms. Wilson, Principal Davis said, think about this carefully. I'm thinking carefully. What message does it send if we ignore bullying because of who someone's parent is? Robert stood up. Very well. I'll make sure the board reviews this incident thoroughly during your tenure evaluation. After they left, Sarah called her mother's nurse to check in. The morning shift would cost another $100 they didn't have. Later that day, Marcus approached her desk after class. Ms. Wilson, I heard about the meeting. My mom wants to speak with you. That evening, Sarah met Marcus's mother, Linda, at a small cafe. Linda worked as a hospital cleaner, her uniform still on after her shift. Marcus told me everything, Linda said. We can speak up for you at the board meeting. That might make things worse, Sarah replied. Robert Greene has influence. But we have the truth, Linda insisted. Marcus recorded everything on his phone when they cornered him. He was so scared that day he hit record in his pocket. Sarah felt a mix of hope and worry. Having proof helps, but using it might make things difficult for Marcus. You stood up for my son. Let us stand up for you. Sarah looked at Linda's tired but determined face. Sometimes courage came from unexpected places. The next day, Sarah found a note in her faculty mailbox. The handwriting was unfamiliar, and the message was brief. Your actions were noticed. Stay strong. The following week brought mounting pressure at Lincoln High. Sarah noticed Tom and his friends watching her between classes, whispering and smirking. But more surprisingly, other students began stopping by her classroom during lunch. Ms. Wilson, we saw what happened that day, Amy, a junior, said quietly. Behind the gymnasium? Yeah, Tom and his friends have been doing this for months, Michael added. They took my brother's graphing calculator last semester. Sarah looked at the small group gathering in her classroom. Why didn't you report it? Because Tom's dad always makes it go away, Michael replied. Everyone knows that. During her free period, Sarah visited the school counselor's office. Mrs. Rodriguez had worked at Lincoln High for 20 years. 6 incidents this year alone, Mrs. Rodriguez said, showing Sarah a folder. All involving Tom's group, all mysteriously dropped. Why are you showing me this? Because your tenure review is next week. The board needs to see these records. That evening at the hospital, Sarah's mother noticed her distraction. What's troubling you, Sarah? Remember how David used to come home with missing books and torn backpacks? Her mother's face softened. And we believed him when he said he was just careless. I have proof now, Mom, about similar things happening at my school, but using it might cost me my job. You already made your choice the moment you stepped between those boys and Marcus. Sarah's phone buzzed. A text from Linda. Marcus showed me the recording. 3 other students came forward. They want to help. Later that night, Sarah found another note in her faculty mailbox. Same handwriting as before. The board meeting won't go as Mr. Greene expects. Truth matters. Sarah stared at the note, wondering about its source. Tomorrow she would submit all the evidence to Mr. Chen at the district office. Her hands trembled as she organized the documents, Marcus's recording, Mrs. Rodriguez's records, and statements from other students. The tenure review could wait. Some things mattered more than job security. Her brother David had dropped out in 11th grade. Nobody had stood up for him then, but she could stand up for Marcus now. Her phone buzzed again. A message from Principal Davis. Board meeting moved up. Tomorrow morning. Mr. Greene's request. Sarah took a deep breath. Earlier than expected. But she was ready. It was time to break the cycle of silence. Sarah arrived early for the board meeting, clutching her folder of evidence. The conference room gradually filled with unexpected faces. Students, parents, and even Mrs. Rodriguez. Robert Greene entered, his confident stride faltering slightly at the crowd. "This is a closed board meeting." "Actually, it's not," Mr. Chen spoke from the doorway. "As a district representative, I requested it be open to the school community." Principal Davis shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "Perhaps we should focus on Ms. Wilson's tenure review." "Yes, less," Robert Greene said. "Ms. Wilson made serious allegations against respected students without proof." Sarah stood, her voice steady. "I have proof, Mr. Greene, and not just about that day." She placed Mrs. Rodriguez's folder on the table. 6 documented incidents this year involving your son's group, all mysteriously disappeared. Those cases were resolved," Robert Greene said firmly. A parent stood up. "Like my son's calculator was resolved. He saved for months to buy that." "Or my daughter's art project," another parent added. "The one that was destroyed before the exhibition?" Marcus raised his hand. "I have the recording from that morning." Robert Greene's face reddened. "This is about Ms. Wilson's teaching ability, not some schoolyard disputes." "It's about everything that makes a teacher," Mr. Chen said. "Ms. Wilson, your test scores and classroom evaluations are exemplary, but more importantly, we have dozens of letters from students and parents." Sarah looked surprised. Mr. Chen continued reading from a letter. "Ms. Wilson stayed after school for 2 months, helping my daughter pass calculus. She never asked for anything in return." Another letter. "When my son was being bullied, Ms. Wilson was the only one who listened." Tom shifted in his seat, looking at the floor. His father's confident demeanor began to crack. "The board needs to consider," Robert Greene started. "The board needs to consider that a teacher's job isn't just about equations and test scores," Mr. Chen interrupted. "It's about protecting students and teaching them right from wrong." Principal Davis cleared his throat. "Given the evidence and community support, I recommend we move forward with Ms. Wilson's tenure approval." "I second that," Mrs. Rodriguez added firmly. Sarah felt tears forming but held them back. She thought of David, of Marcus, of every student who needed someone to speak up. Sometimes doing the right thing came with a cost, but sometimes it also came with unexpected support. The vote would happen soon, but looking around the room at all the faces there to support her, Sarah already felt like she'd won something more important than tenure. The following morning, Sarah found an official-looking envelope on her desk. Inside was a letter from the National Education Foundation, one of the country's most prestigious organizations. "Dear Miss Wilson, an anonymous donor has brought your dedication to student welfare to our attention." Sarah sat down, reading carefully. The foundation was offering her a substantial grant, enough to cover her mother's medical bills and establish an anti-bullying program at Lincoln High. Principal Davis knocked on her classroom door. "Sarah, do you have a moment?" "Of course." "Tom and his father are here. They'd like to speak with you." In the conference room, Tom looked different, smaller somehow, without his usual confidence. "Ms. Wilson," Robert Greene began, his voice lacking its previous authority. "Tom has something to say." Tom looked up. "I'm sorry, not just about Marcus's laptop, about everything. My dad and I talked all night." Robert Greene cleared his throat. "I was wrong. I've been wrong for a long time. Protecting Tom from consequences wasn't helping him." "What happens now?" Sarah asked. Tom suggested community service at the middle school tutoring program. "His idea." Sarah nodded. "That's a good start." Later that day, Marcus and Linda visited her classroom. "We saw the foundation's car outside," Linda said. "The representative told us everything." "The anonymous donor," Sarah said. "It was your recording that made the difference, Marcus." Marcus smiled. "Mom always says, standing up for what's right matters more than staying quiet for an easy life." Sarah opened her desk drawer and took out the mysterious notes she'd received. The handwriting matched Mrs. Rodriguez's perfectly. "Sometimes we all need a little encouragement to do the right thing," Sarah said softly. That afternoon, Sarah visited her mother at the hospital, sharing the news about the grant. "David would be proud of you," her mother said. You did what none of us could do for him." Sarah squeezed her mother's hand. "I think it's time to call him. Tell him about the anti-bullying program. Maybe he'd like to help." Looking out the hospital window, Sarah thought about how one moment of standing up for what was right had created a ripple effect, touching more lives than she could have imagined. The grant would help her mother heal, help the school grow, and maybe even help heal old family wounds. Sometimes courage came with a cost, but sometimes it came with unexpected rewards that meant more than money ever could. Loved this story? Tap that like button and subscribe to Mystic Tales for more. Let us know how this story made you feel with a single word in the comments.